Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, live on your TV and your radio from Downing Street this morning as we discuss the finer details of Partygate. Just will this Prime Minister survive? What are the trials and tribulations facing him in the weeks to come? We'll be talking to a Labour MP, a polling expert and some commentators. So all that's come after your morning headlines.
A very good morning. It is 9:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Now, UK inflation has hit a 30-year high. That's put households under growing pressure. Official figures show it jumped to 7% in March. That's up from 6.2% in February. Increasing prices of petrol and food are fuelling the rise. Another increase in inflation is expected in April, reflecting the recent hike in energy bills. Pressures mounting on the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to resign after they were fined for breaching lockdown rules. Boris Johnson, his wife and Rishi Sunak all broke the law when they attended the Prime Minister's birthday party in June of 2020. Well, they have all apologised and confirmed the fines have been paid. In Ukraine, the mayor of Mariupol says more than 100,000 people are waiting to be evacuated from the city. Well, that's after the Deputy Prime Minister said humanitarian corridors wouldn't be open today because it's too dangerous. Fierce fighting is also said to be ongoing in the east, where Russian forces have regrouped. The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced at the Old Bailey this morning. Ali Harbi Ali killed the Conservative MP in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, could impose a whole life sentence, which means the 26-year-old will never be released. A manhunt is underway in New York for a 62-year-old believed to be responsible for yesterday's shooting in a subway station. Frank James has been identified as a person of interest. 10 people were hit directly by gunfire. 5 are in a critical but stable condition. 13 others were injured. We'll keep you up to date across the day here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now let's head back to Tom for the briefing.
Good morning, it's 9:33 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, live from Downing Street as a tumultuous piece of news dropped yesterday afternoon. Yes, the Prime Minister, his wife and the Chancellor of the Exchequer all issued with fixed penalty notice orders relating to an event on the 19th of June 2020. Yes, the Prime Minister has been fined. He has faced that troublesome situation that some did not expect he may be facing. What did he have to say about all of this? Well, this is what he said from Chequers last night.
Today I've received a fixed penalty notice from the Metropolitan Police relating to an event in Downing Street on the 19th of June 2020. And let me say immediately that I've paid the fine and I once again offer a full apology. And in a spirit of openness and humility, I want to be completely clear about what happened on that date. My day began shortly after 7 a.m. and I chaired 8 meetings in number 10, including the Cabinet Committee deciding COVID strategy. I visited a school in Hemel Hempstead, which took me out of Downing Street for over 4 hours. And amongst all these engagements, on a day that happened to be my birthday, there was a brief gathering in the Cabinet room shortly after 2 p.m, lasting for less than 10 minutes, during which people I work with kindly passed on their good wishes. And I have to say, in all frankness, at that time, it did not occur to me that this might have been a breach of the rules. But of course, the police have found otherwise, and I fully respect the outcome of their investigation. I understand the anger that many will feel that I myself fell short when it came to observing the very rules which the government I lead had introduced to protect the public. And I accept in all sincerity that people had the right to expect better. And now I feel an even greater sense of obligation to deliver on the priorities of the British people, strengthening our economy, creating jobs and opportunities, levelling up across the whole of the United Kingdom. Now, of course, ensuring that Putin fails in Ukraine and easing the burden on hard-working families caused by higher energy prices. I will take that forward, that task, with due humility, but with maximum determination to fulfil my duty and do what is best for the country I serve. Thanks very much.
A defiant Prime Minister there, speaking with some regret from Chequers last night. Let's listen now to the view from the other side of the benches of the House of Commons. Lloyd Russell-Moyle is the Labour Member of Parliament for Brighton Kempton, and I'm delighted to say can join us now live on the briefing. Lloyd Russell-Moyle, welcome to the programme. First of all, the Prime Minister there in that statement said at the time it did not occur to him that this event could have been in breach of the rules. He was telling the truth, wasn't he?
Well, he quite well could be telling the truth, and I'm not saying now that he's not. But when it was pointed out to him, numerous times, he continued to deny that these events had even happened. When it was pointed out to him that there were breaches of the rules in Parliament, he continued to deny. His staff knew that the rules were being breached, because, of course, they were joking about it in press conferences. This isn't just one event. There were other events in Downing Street where the rules had been breached as well. And he continued to deny it. He continued to try and cover it up. Now, I think we can all sometimes get things wrong. But what we mustn't do is then lie about it and cover up. And the Prime Minister may have got something wrong, may have urged on the wrong side of what the rules and regulations were. And for that, he should receive a fixed penalty notice. But for lying to Parliament, for lying to the public, for continuing to deny the serious nature of what he did, he really needs to consider his position. And more importantly, Conservative members of Parliament need to consider whether they continue to support him. Conservative members of Parliament in the Gulf War changed Prime Minister. In the Second World War, changed Prime Minister. In the Crimean War, changed Prime Minister. In fact, in many times of national crisis, the Conservative Party have done the right thing. I'm not saying replace him with a Labour Prime Minister, of course not, but they've changed to replace them with another Conservative Prime Minister who is of the order of the day and who's not a liar. And that's what I think now needs to happen. Not because he broke the rules per se, but because he continued to deny and cover up the breaking of those rules going forward.
Well, this seems to be an incredibly important distinction, and I'm glad it's one that you have made today on this programme, because as far as this particular event, the one for which the Prime Minister and the Chancellor and the Prime Minister's wife have received a fixed penalty notice order for, this particular event, the people in the building behind me now, in number 10 Downing Street, they seemed to genuinely believe at the time that this event was within the rules. I want to draw everyone's attention to an article that appeared in the Times newspaper on the 20th of June 2020. This article appearing the day after the event, the birthday party that happened in the Cabinet room. It spoke about how the Chancellor and the Prime Minister had some brief respite from their hard work on a day of busy meetings and decision-making situations. People watching on television can see this article on the screen now, dated back in 2020, revealing the fact of this party. Now, the journalists who wrote about this story didn't see it as a rule-breaking event. Those who read that newspaper at the time didn't see it as a rule-breaking event. And the people who briefed it out from Downing Street clearly didn't see it as a rule-breaking event. So, on this particular issue, was number 10 not telling the truth? Was the Prime Minister not telling the truth? That he genuinely did not think it was a rule-breaking event?
Well, he wasn't telling the truth once it had been pointed out to him that it was a rule-breaking event, because clearly it was. Now, at that very moment, in that very second, did the Prime Minister think, I'm going to break the rules and have a birthday cake? I can't speak for what was in the Prime Minister's mind at that moment. I also can't speak for what was in the mind of all those readers who read the article, some of whom may have thought that it was a rule-breaking event. But the police have investigated. The police have decided that that was a rule-breaking event and needs a fixed penalty notice. Now, there might be other sanctions that follow from this, because, of course, if you make minor breaches whilst in public office, it can lead to a more serious breach. Now, the police and the prosecution services and Sue Gray's report will have to come to light to further those areas. But what we do know is once it was pointed out to the Prime Minister that parties were taking place, that he had taken part in parties, he continued to flatly deny that he'd even been there. So he was trying to cover up to Parliament, mislead Parliament. That is the problem. If he had come clean at the beginning, when it was pointed out, when his staff were joking about it being against the rules, so they clearly did know that things against the rules were happening in 10 Downing Street, and he had it pointed out to him, and he continued to deny it.
Well, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, thank you for talking us through and providing your perspective there on this issue. Surely many people watching will agree with you, some will not. Remember, GBViews at gbnews.uk if you want to get involved in the conversation. For now, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, Labour MP, thanks for joining us this morning. Now let's turn to the broader view of the public, and expert psephologist Professor Sir John Curtis of Strathclyde University, one of the leading political thinkers in the United Kingdom. Welcome to the programme, Sir John. The public clearly were incredibly furious about these revelations several months ago. What hints do we have towards whether or not the same level of anger is arising now or otherwise?
Well, we had 3 instant polls done between 2 o'clock when this story broke and 7 o'clock yesterday evening. The story they tell, I think, is that yesterday's news has increased the proportion of people who think that the Prime Minister should resign as compared with the position a fortnight ago, but that the proportion who take that view is, at the moment at least, still lower than it was when Partygate was dominating the headlines before and after Christmas, and that is perhaps, and crucially, is particularly true of those who voted Conservative in 2019. So just to put some flesh on those bones, the three polls between them had between 57% and 61% of all voters saying that the Prime Minister should resign. Now, just before yesterday, with 2 or 3 polls that had asked people, should the Prime Minister resign, should he resign if he's fine? And on average, they had found about 52% of people saying that he should go. So yesterday's figures are higher than that. On the other hand, during last January, we were regularly looking at figures north of 60%, often around 2/3 of people saying that the Prime Minister should resign. And it looks as though at the moment, at least, the proportion who thinks he should go is still lower than that. And particularly amongst Conservative voters. Most Conservative voters, during the height of Partygate, we were looking at around 2/5 of them saying he should go. Yesterday's polls had that number down to a quarter. And of course, for Tory MPs, at the end of the day, it's the views of their own supporters that perhaps will be of most importance to them as they decide what direction to go in.
It's a fascinating situation that the level of anger seems to have risen, no doubt, but not to the level that it was at beforehand. Does that mean that potentially the Prime Minister, given everything else that's going on in the world, given the fact of no clear successor on the cards, does that mean that the Prime Minister has an avenue to ride this out?
Yes, he certainly has an avenue. Of course, in the end, what will matter is the views of Tory MPs, and they will be reading the polls, yes, but they will also be taking other considerations into account. Of course, the one really good news for the Prime Minister yesterday was that Rishi Sunak was also fined. That certainly means that I think the final nail has gone into the coffin of Rishi Sunak's immediate prospects of becoming Prime Minister. And it's probably also meant that Tory MPs are now less certain about who would succeed the Prime Minister if he were to go. And I suspect all of that is to the Prime Minister's advantage. On the other hand, what we do have to bear in mind, Tom, is just to look at where are the Tories standing in the opinion polls. And the answer is actually the Tory lead has been widening in the course of the last week or fortnight. Labour are 6 points ahead in the polls. That's not quite at the level that it was in January when they were running for a while at around 8 or 9 points, but it contrasts very, very sharply with the 4-point lead that the Conservatives were still enjoying at the end of October before the Owen Paterson affair started these stories about Mr. Johnson's ethics and probity. And that therefore, while the anger may have dissipated, it still seems to be the case that Partygate has left quite a considerable legacy in terms of loss of Conservative support in the polls. And now, who knows where we will end up in future, but I would put it to you that it may be that if indeed we discover in 6 months' time that Mr. Johnson is indeed still Prime Minister, whether the Conservatives are still behind in the polls, that yesterday might have been the day on which the opposition, perhaps for the first time, thought that maybe Boris Johnson remaining as Prime Minister and leading the Conservative Party to the next election is perhaps advantageous rather than disadvantageous to them. Now, I'm not sure we're there yet, but that's certainly at the end of the day is one of the calculations that Conservative MPs will have to bear in mind. And I suspect the Labour Party this morning are not particularly unhappy at the fact that neither the Prime Minister nor the Chancellor have resigned.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out in Parliament when it finally returns in the middle of next week. But for now, Professor Sir John Curtis, thank you so much for talking us through the broad public opinion there in response to this groundbreaking story. Well, let's move on now and get some reaction from someone who used to work in the building behind me. Sean Worth is a former Downing Street advisor, and I'm delighted to say can join us now. Welcome to the programme, Sean. First of all, the Prime Minister issued a statement much earlier than the Chancellor did last night. The Chancellor taking several hours, reportedly, weighing up his own future. How does the dynamic between number 10 and number 11 change now going forward?
Well, I tell you what, I found that interesting as well. And I think the communications outfit in number 10 now, Gito Harry, who's the head of comms there, who was with Boris at City Hall when he was London Mayor, it's a lot sharper. And I was going to say, actually, before you asked me the question, I was just thinking that the clip you showed right at the beginning of Boris being very sorrowful and just apologising and just getting everything out on the plate should have happened, as I was saying on your channel previously, right at the beginning. But the whole comms show there was a complete mess. The Chancellor is interesting because he's not only late to coming out and making apologies, he's also dragging out his tax affairs. If you've seen this, he's having an inquiry into his tax status, which is just dragging that story out. You should just kill it and move on. So I think there is an interesting dynamic now. You've got number 10, a bit sharper operation than the Chancellor.
It does perhaps suggest that number 10 were expecting at some point Boris Johnson may be slapped with a fixed penalty notice order, had something perhaps up their sleeves for what they would do in this eventuality. And yet the Chancellor perhaps wasn't expecting that he would get a fixed penalty notice order. Do you think that counts for anything in terms of how people understand this story, those of us who've been following it more closely? The fact that the Chancellor genuinely did not think that he would have got a fixed penalty notice order, that he didn't think he'd done anything wrong, does that give anything, does that lend anything to him in the minds of the public, or does it all get muddled up in the same sleazy story?
Yeah, I don't think it's an excuse for coming out late that you didn't know what you were doing, because the fine came in well before even Johnson came out with an apology. If you get fined by the police and you're in public office, you need to get everything out and just apologise immediately and be very gushing about it and just hope everybody moves on. You can't drag it out. But in terms of the political damage done to number 10, I think it's already there, and this latest thing hasn't really done anything. For the Chancellor, it comes on the back of the tax stuff. So I think he is, his price is kind of falling a bit, if you like. I think the real challenge, I didn't hear Professor Curtis's remarks, so I'm sorry I didn't have feed on what he said, but I think this will all blow over by probably Friday. But I think the local elections, I mean, this is a golden opportunity for the Labour Party to say on all their leaflets now, whenever they knock on a door and somebody opens it, just to remind them that the guy in number 10 and in number 11 have just been slapped with sanctions by the police. So that's where the real damage, I think, could happen.
Certainly, and just finally, in this conversation, the Met Police investigation has not yet concluded. This was a fairly ambiguous event. Some people didn't think that this event would have been one that met the threshold for a fine. Potentially, this suggests that there may be more fines coming down the track. What would be your advice to how number 10 should respond to potentially a further fine for the Prime Minister?
I think, as I say, I think the damage has already been done, and people that didn't like Johnson now don't like him a little bit more. Most people thought that number 10 handled Partygate terribly, and the perception number 10 was kind of cracked during that. I don't think these consequences now, these events now, are having huge consequences. I think if there's another fine, Johnson just handled it handle it exactly the way he's done today. Just come out immediately. Very sorry, I've already apologised. Here's what happened. And obviously there's behind the scenes, you can try and influence the news agenda to have bigger stories than that coming out at the time. And I think that, by the way, is helping Johnson right now. That during Partygate there wasn't really much else going on, but now obviously you've got a war in Ukraine, you've got Johnson going over and having a walkabout with the Ukrainian president, things like that. Those are all putting this into a perspective, I think, that there wasn't before. And that's obviously all helpful for Johnson.
Certainly, media context matters so very much in this whole scandal. Sean Worth, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your views there of what exactly is going on and the strategy in the building behind me and how they're game planning all of this. Really fascinating stuff. Well, let's move on now to Andrew Lillico. He's the Principal and Executive Director of Europe Economics and a Telegraph columnist who has got pretty strident views on the Partygate affair. Welcome to the programme, Andrew. I suppose, first of all, what is your take on whether or not the Prime Minister has broken the ministerial code? Has the Prime Minister lied?
Well, I don't think there's any evidence of him lying over this particular event. I think it's pretty obvious that what's happened here is that he was given some He was given some birthday greetings by work colleagues. He'd earlier in the day been given a birthday cake by some school children at a school in Hemel Hempstead, and it never occurred to him that there would be any violation of the rules here. In fact, one thing that I think people aren't asking enough is whether there is any other instance of anybody anywhere in the country, amongst the various thousands or tens of thousands of fines that have been given out, of somebody being fined for being given a birthday cake or being given birthday greetings by work colleagues. I suspect that there are none. My guess is that this is a situation of one rule for the Prime Minister and one rule for everybody else. So I think this particular event is something that he will shrug off politically very easily, because everybody will understand that if it's a violation of the rules at all, it's not a violation that would have applied to anybody else, and it's some very technical violation which doesn't really indicate that there was any lying. He may yet, though, have a problem with another event, because what seems to be happening here is that the matter of fining people event by event. So we had some of the karaoke party fines earlier, and now we've had these fines here. The issue for him may come when it comes to the so-called ABBA party event. So this is the one where his wife was supposed to have celebrated the fact that Dominic Cummings was fired, and he may have been upstairs in the flat at the time, but this event seems to have been a full-on party with singing ABBA late into the night and drinking and dancing and that kind of thing. So in the case of that event, if she ends up fined over that, then even if he's not fined and he wasn't there, it's going to be pretty difficult, I think, for him to claim that he didn't know that event had taken place and that there was, in fact, a genuine party. And I think that that's the one event where it's plausible that he's lied to MPs about it. And Tory MPs will then have to take a view as to what they think about the fact that he'd lied to protect his wife. But basically all the other events, it seems to me, are things that he's going to shrug off very easily, because at the most they're technical violations. If we'd still been in significant COVID restrictions, then the fact that you had even technical violations by those at the centre would have been a problem. But it's months ago now. It's old news. We're talking about things from 2 years ago. The particular birthday cake event, which we're talking about, which he was fined for yesterday, was reported in the newspapers the next day. Nobody at the time thought there was the slightest thing wrong about it. And I think that this particular thing will not be a problem
and
for him
yes,
at all.
Andrew Lillico, people seem to care now, and I wonder, just in the final 30 seconds of this conversation, is this very logical interpretation of events, the fact that, yes, there's various reports of, for example, nurses being handed cakes by their colleagues, appearing in the newspapers, not being fined, all of that's very logical and, of course, comparable. But in the emotional minds of the public, that doesn't seem to cut through.
Well, no, and I think that it certainly would have been a bigger issue for him if we'd still been in COVID restrictions. And the public still bear some residual echo of anger of that. But I think that things will move on very fast. And I think that by the time of the next general election, nobody will remember these particular sorts of events at all. This isn't going to be a problem for him. He will survive this. There may be problems for him down the line, though.
Well, it's a bold prediction, Andrew Lillico. We will keep a keen eye on the electoral events between now and then to see exactly how this plays out. But for now, thank you for joining us on the briefing this morning. I've been Tom Harwood, live from Downing Street. Up next, it's Patrick and Mercy for To The Point. But first, it's your weather forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Moroki on your TV, online and radio.
Yes, and we've got a very special show today, all the way up until midday, because we're dedicating today's show entirely to the stories that you've told us matter to you. You've been getting in touch.
Yes, that's right. All our stories today have been picked by you at home. So we'll dive straight in just a moment. But before that, here's your morning's headlines.
A very good morning to you. It's just 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date today. Now, UK inflation has hit a 30-year high, putting households under growing pressure. The official figures show it jumped to 7% in March. That's up from 6.2% in February. Increasing petrol and food prices have fuelled the rise. Another increase in inflation is expected in April, with the data set to reflect the hike in energy bills, which is further increasing the squeeze on the public. Pressures mounting on the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to resign after they were fined for breaching lockdown rules. Boris Johnson, his wife Carrie Johnson and Rishi Sunak all broke the law when they attended the Prime Minister's birthday party in June 2020. They've all since apologised and confirmed the fines have been paid. The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the Conservative Party will lose all credibility if Boris Johnson remains in power.
If you have a situation where it's established that there's one rule for the ruled and another for those who are ruled, that's pretty undermining of our democracy. And not only did he repeatedly break the rules, but he repeatedly lied about it too. So if we shrug this off and we sort of say, let's move on, then I think we're accepting something that's very corrosive of our democracy.
In Ukraine, the mayor of Mariupol says more than 100,000 people are waiting to be evacuated from the city. The Deputy Prime Minister said humanitarian corridors in Ukraine won't be open today because it's too dangerous. Fierce fighting is also said to be ongoing in the east, where Russian forces have regrouped. Well, President Zelensky says Ukrainian troops will continue to defend the country.
Do you remember how Russia boasted that they would capture Kyiv in 48 hours? Instead, Ukraine has been repelling the enemy for 48 days. Today, it's worth remembering this.
The terrorist who killed Sir David Amess is going to be sentenced at the Old Bailey this morning. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and of preparing terrorist acts on Monday. He stabbed the Conservative MP at a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, could impose a whole life sentence, which means Ali will never be released. A manhunt is underway in New York following yesterday's shooting at a subway station. 62-year-old Frank James has been identified as a person of interest. The suspect was seen fleeing the area after smoke bombs were detonated. 10 people were directly hit by gunfire. 5 are in a critical but stable condition. 13 others were injured. The boss of EasyJet says hold-ups with security checks on new airline crew has led to numerous flight cancellations in recent days. The chief executive says it's waiting for the Department for Transport to give permission to around 100 new staff to start work. Well, it comes on the day that Flybe resumes flights over 2 years after it went into administration and caused thousands of job losses. Head of the Points Guy UK, Nikki Kelvin, says people are desperate to get on holiday.
Airline returning, that's been gone for just over 2 years, is really exciting and a really good signal for travel. Airlines are ready to fight for business, and I think passengers are ready to fly. Bookings are up hundreds of percents on what they looked like a couple of years ago, and we're almost actually at pre-pandemic levels in terms of the amount of passengers travelling.
A new survey has found over a third of GPs plan to quit in the next 5 years. New figures from GP WorkLife found nearly half of family doctors working in England aren't satisfied with their job. Well, GPs cited increasing workloads, demands from patients and not having enough time to do the job properly. Prince Charles is urging everyone to buy certified ocean-friendly products when they go shopping. In a pre-recorded video speech at our Ocean conference, the Prince of Wales warned the current threat to sea life is dire. The future king says we need to tackle the problem of plastic pollution on a massive scale in a bid to tackle climate change. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on your TV, radio and online.
Now, we're doing it differently today. This show is all about you.
Yes, that's right. All week we've been asking you to email in, telling us the stories that matter to you, what you want to talk about.
Exactly. So we really do mean it, right, when we say that we care about what matters to you. We want to hold a mirror up to the nation and reflect those burning issues that are close to your heart that you don't think get enough coverage. So with that in mind, we're going to be doing a big discussion on grooming gangs, something we know that you really care about. Most media outlets will just sweep it under the rug, but not us. We're going to get stuck in.
Yes, we are, and lots of you as well have got in touch and told us that you're not hearing enough people on your TVs and radio standing up for women. You think women's rights are being eroded, and we've had many emails from women telling us they're concerned that policemen who identify as women can now strip search female prisoners. We have a former superintendent on talking us through all this.
And every day I'm inundated with emails about how worried you are about the money in your pocket. In fact, I've got some of them printed off and ready to go here. It's the cost of living crisis, it's inflation, it's energy, it's bills, it's left, right and centre. And I think you care about that more than you care about whether or not Boris Johnson ate a slice of cake.
Yes, and we actually have a poll going out on our Twitter. It's currently actually live on our Twitter right now at GB News. What matters more to you this morning? Boris resigning or dealing with the cost of living crisis? Get on our Twitter and vote in that poll.
And as usual, get in touch with us with your views. GBviews, gbnews.uk. Let's do it.
Well, if we haven't said it enough already, today is a show entirely curated by you, our viewers and listeners. And one of the popular topics was, of course, unsurprisingly, the war in Ukraine. Some viewers wanted us to provide more information about the background to the crisis and the wider political situation in Eastern Europe.
Yes, exactly. For example, one anonymous viewer asked us, GBNews might do well to explore the historical context and the role of NATO expansion in the ongoing Ukraine war.
Yes, and Phil wrote in asking us this. Good morning, Mercy and Patrick. Please, could you discuss the 7-year bombing of the Donbass region?
Yes, that's what we're going to do, OK? That's what we're going to discuss now with our next guest. And we're joined by NATO historian, journalist and ex-reserves officer